If you enjoy my videos, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps my channel grow and I will make more good videos for you. Countryside was quiet in the way that made you slow down, breathe deeper, and forget the noise of everything you left behind. Ayaan stepped out of the taxi, his worn leather bag slung over his shoulder, and looked at the old house nestled between sleepy trees and golden fields. It was the kind of place that didn't shout for attention but waited for someone who knew how to listen. The house had character. Weathered stone walls, ivy climbing like forgotten poetry, windows that held the scent of 100 rainy days. Ayaan had seen it in a listing weeks ago, and something about it called to him. He didn't know then that it wasn't the house that would change him, it was the woman inside it. She opened the door before he could knock. "I'm Mira," she said, her voice low and warm like velvet in a dark room. She was barefoot, wearing a cream-colored dress that brushed the wooden floor behind her like a whisper. Her eyes were large, quiet, unreadable. Ayaan forgot the chill in the wind. "Ayaan," he replied. "Thanks for letting me rent the upstairs room." She nodded and moved aside to let him in. The house is old. Creaks a little, sings when the wind blows and forgets where it puts things. But she's good company. "Like you're talking about a person," he said with a soft smile. Mira didn't smile back, but there was a glint in her eyes. Maybe she is. Upstairs, the room had a slanted ceiling and a wide window that framed the sky like a painting. Ayaan didn't unpack right away. He sat at the window, sketchpad in hand, drawing the line of trees outside, the sway of wild grass. And eventually, the outline of a woman at the bottom of the stairs, standing still, watching the wind with her hair loose and her thoughts far away. In the days that followed, they barely spoke more than necessary. Mira kept to herself. She painted in the garden, her fingers stained with color, her dress catching sunlight. Ayaan, too, painted, but in silence, always watching, always wondering about the sadness that sometimes drifted into her eyes when she thought no one noticed. Once he found her in the kitchen, barefoot again, humming something old while making tea. Her voice was soft, not meant to be heard, but it stayed with him. He couldn't name the melody, but he remembered how it made his heart ache. "You sing?" he asked. She turned, surprised. "Not really." "It sounded like something that belonged to you." She glanced down at the teacups. "It did once." And just like that, she left the room. They began sharing small things after that. A loaf of bread. Cup of tea. A moment of stillness in the garden. She never asked about his past, and he didn't ask about hers. But sometimes she'd sit across from him while he painted. She wouldn't say a word. Just watch. "Why don't you ever paint her face?" she asked once, pointing to a canvas. Ayaan looked at the unfinished portrait. A woman standing beneath a willow tree, faceless but full of emotion. "I haven't seen her yet," he said. Mira tilted her head. "But she's in your mind." "Yes." "But she hasn't turned around." That night, he painted until dawn, and somehow, without meaning to, her face began to appear. Mira, not fully, not exactly, but enough. Enough to feel real. Enough to feel close. One rainy afternoon, she brought him coffee. No words, just a quiet offering. Her fingers brushed his, and for the first time, he felt how cold her hands were. And how warm her eyes looked, watching him take the cup. "Do you miss the city?" she asked. "Not really," he said. "I think I was always meant for silence." She nodded slowly. "Me too." They didn't speak much after that. But their silences changed. They became comfortable, intimate, the kind that held more emotion than a conversation could. They began moving around each other like music, soft, in sync, and never forced. Ayaan began to draw her hands, delicate, always moving with intention. He drew her hair, her profile, the curve of her shoulder as she read by the fireplace. He never showed her the sketches, but they filled his room like quiet prayers. One evening, power went out. The storm outside howled like a beast trying to remember its name. Ayaan came downstairs to find Mira lighting candles. The warm glow softened her face, made her seem younger, more real. "Scared of storms?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just restless." She poured wine into 2 glasses and handed him one. They sat on the floor, backs against the wall, watching the shadows dance. "I used to believe that love was something you earned," she said after a long pause. "That if you did everything right, it would stay." Ayaan looked at her. "And now? I think love just visits, stays as long as it wants, and leaves when it's done. Then what's the point?" She took a sip of wine, her gaze far away. "Maybe the point isn't to hold it. Maybe it's just to feel it. Fully. While it's here." He didn't answer. Just watched her. The soft curve of her lips. The way her collarbone caught the candlelight. And he thought, "I'm already feeling it. The more than I should." That night, something changed between them. Not with a kiss. Not with a touch. But with a look. Kind of look that tells you a heart is opening slowly, cautiously, but surely. The next morning, she wasn't in the kitchen. He found her in the garden, barefoot again, her hands in the soil, planting something delicate and green. "Morning," he said. She looked up, hair messy, eyes bright. "Wanna help?" He knelt beside her, fingers brushing hers in the dirt. "What are we planting?" he asked. "Hope," she said with a smile that finally reached her eyes. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stood by his window, watching the moon spill silver over the grass. And then he saw her. Mira, walking alone in the field, her dress flowing like a ghost. He followed her. She didn't turn around, but somehow she knew he was there. They walked side by side in silence. The stars above them, the earth soft beneath their feet. "I come here when I can't breathe," she said. "When the house feels too full of old things." Ayaan didn't ask what those things were. He only said, "You can come to me instead." She stopped walking. Looked at him. "Can I?" "Yes," he said, without thinking. "Always." For the first time, she touched his face. Her fingers traced his jaw, his cheek, his lips. Not a kiss. Not yet. But the promise of one. Question he was ready to answer. "Don't fall in love with me, Ayaan," she whispered. "I don't know how to stay." "I'm not asking you to stay," he replied, his voice barely audible. "I'm just asking you to be here. Now." She looked at him for a long moment. And then, gently, she leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. The wind moved through the grass. The stars stayed quiet. And 2 broken hearts began to beat in the same rhythm. Back at the house, they didn't speak. But that night, Mira left her door open. And Ayaan didn't sleep alone. The days began to stretch like soft silk between their fingertips, warm, quiet, and wrapped in something unspoken. After that night in the field, nothing was ever quite the same. Mira didn't retreat, and Ayaan didn't push. They simply let each day unfold, like pages in a book they were writing together, without ever saying so. They started eating dinner together. It began with simple gestures, Mira cooking extra, Ayaan bringing in wildflowers from the field and setting them on the table without a word. Neither of them called it a habit, but soon enough, the silence of dinner was something they both waited for. It wasn't empty silence. It was full of glances, stolen smiles, and the soft brush of fingers when one passed the salt or poured the wine. She told him things in pieces. "I used to live by the sea," she said one night, cutting her food into tiny bites she barely ate. "It was always loud there. Crashing wild, alive. Why did you leave?" Mira shrugged. "Sometimes loud things get too quiet, and you realize you were only hearing echoes." Ayaan didn't ask more. He learned not to press. She gave her past like broken seashells, fragments, never the whole. She told him about her mother, who loved music but forgot everything else in the end. About a garden she once had, full of tulips. About a man she lost, whose name she never said. And each time, Ayaan listened like her words were paint, brushing across the canvas of the person he was trying to see clearly. He began to paint her. Not in secret anymore. She became the center of his studio, his light, his question. The Mira in the garden. Mira reading by the window. Mira asleep on the couch, one hand draped over a book. He captured not just how she looked, but how she felt. Her stillness. Her sorrow. Her quiet strength. One afternoon, she walked into his studio and stood in front of the largest canvas. It was unfinished, but unmistakably her. "That's me," she said softly. Ayaan nodded, not turning away from the easel. "I didn't know I looked like that." "You don't," he said, dipping his brush. "But that's how I see you." She moved closer, eyes fixed on the image. Her lips parted slightly as if about to say something, but she didn't. Instead, she reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were cool against his skin. "Paint whatever you need," she whispered. "Even if I disappear from it one day." "You won't," he said, too quickly, too honestly. But she only smiled. They started taking walks through the fields. Mira liked walking barefoot no matter how muddy the ground. She claimed she could feel things better that way, roots, stones, little truths beneath the earth. Ayaan walked beside her, their hands often brushing, sometimes interlocking. They didn't talk much on those walks. Sometimes he would stop to sketch, and she would sit beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. He loved those silences most of all. Once they found an old wooden swing hanging from an ancient oak tree. Mira laughed, really laughed, not just smiled with her eyes. It was the first time he heard her laugh freely, and the sound of it stayed in his chest for hours. She sat on the swing, bare feet tucked beneath her dress, and looked at him with a strange kind of softness. "You make things quiet in my head," she said. "How?" "You don't ask for pieces I'm not ready to give." "I'll wait," he said. And she looked down as if afraid to believe him. Nights became longer, slower. Sometimes she would fall asleep beside him, and he'd lie awake, watching the way her breath rose and fell. He didn't touch her, didn't disturb the peace she rarely found. But his heart beat a little faster each time she shifted closer, like she was seeking something she couldn't name. One night, the rain tapped against the windows like a secret. They lay in bed, Mira curled against him, her head on his chest. Ayaan could feel her breath warm against his skin. "Do you believe in soulmates?" she asked suddenly, as if the question had been waiting in the shadows. He thought for a moment. "I believe in timing." "What do you mean?" "Maybe we meet the right people at the wrong time. Maybe love isn't just about who, but when." She went quiet. Then, "What if I'm still in the wrong time?" "Then I'll wait until it's right." She looked up at him, her eyes dark and searching. "Why?" "Because I've never met anyone who made the world feel quieter." Mira leaned up slowly and kissed him, not desperately, not hungrily, but softly, like a memory coming to life. It wasn't their first kiss, but it was the one that meant something. "I don't know if I'll ever be whole," she whispered against his lips. "I don't need you to be," he whispered back. "I just need you to be here." She kissed him again, and this time she didn't hold back. Their bodies moved like they'd known each other forever, slow, reverent, with hands that searched not for pleasure but for meaning. When they held each other afterward, neither said a word. They didn't have to. Mira began opening up in other ways, too. She started humming while watering the garden, leaving her door open more often, wearing lighter dresses that fluttered like butterflies through the halls. Ayaan painted her smile one morning, real, bright, rare. He titled the piece First Spring. She saw it and touched the canvas gently. "Is that really me?" "That's the you I see when you forget to remember." She blinked fast, but no tears fell. Just a nod. And then she kissed him softly. Sometimes he caught her staring at him. Not with desire, but with something deeper. Fear, maybe. Or hope. Or both. One evening, as the sun melted into the trees, she pulled him to the garden and showed him something new. a small patch of freshly bloomed blue flowers. "I planted them last year," she said. "Didn't think they'd come back." "They're beautiful," he whispered. She took his hand, placed it over her heart. "Sometimes I think I'm like them. Buried things trying to bloom again." He looked at her, his thumb tracing the rhythm of her heartbeat. "Then I'll wait here," he said. "For as long as you need." And she kissed him in the garden, with petals falling around them and the wind moving like a sigh through the trees. He didn't know then that the house was keeping secrets. Didn't know about the room hidden in its bones. All he knew was her. Mira. The way she smiled when she caught him painting her without permission. The way she curled into him like he was home. The way her sadness peeked through her joy like moonlight through fog. He was falling. Deep. Fast. But with her, falling felt like floating. Like maybe, just maybe, love was beginning to stay. The wind carried the scent of jasmine that night. The windows were slightly open, letting in the breeze, and Ayaan lay in bed with Mira curled against him. Her breath was warm against his neck, her fingers tangled with his. The world outside the house felt far away, like it belonged to someone else. But then, somewhere near the far wall of the room, he heard it. Tap. Then drag. Then a whisper. It was so faint he thought he imagined it. He held his breath, listening harder. Tap. Drag. Whisper. Mira stirred beside him. Her eyelashes fluttered. He gently ran his fingers through her hair. "You hear that?" he whispered. She went still. Too still. Then, without looking at him, she said softly, "The house makes strange noises sometimes. Old pipes. Settling wood." It didn't sound like pipes. She sat up, pulling the blanket around her, and looked out the window. "It's nothing, Ayaan. Go back to sleep." But she didn't come back to bed. In the morning, Mira was quieter than usual. Her tea sat untouched. She didn't look him in the eyes. Her smile, when it came, was small and tired. Ayaan didn't press her. But the sound stuck in his mind like a thread he couldn't stop tugging. He tried to lose himself in painting in her. They walked together through the wild fields like always, her hand in his, her laugh soft and rare. But she kept glancing back at the house, as if something inside it still clung to her. That night, as they sat by the fire, Ayaan placed his sketchbook on her lap. She flipped through the pages, sketches of her in moments he hadn't even realized she noticed. Her brushing her hair, laughing beneath the tree swing, sleeping, curled up like a child. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "Too beautiful. They're just how I see you." She leaned in and kissed him slowly, sweetly. But even in her kiss, there was something restrained, like a thought she couldn't let slip past her lips. Later that night, after she fell asleep beside him, the noise returned. Tap. Drag. Whisper. Ayaan sat up, the air heavy in the room. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the pipes. It was closer. Inside the wall near the foot of the bed. He got up quietly, not wanting to wake Mira, and walked toward the wall. His fingers touched the wallpaper, floral, aged, curling slightly at the edges. Tap. Drag. He pressed his ear to it. A whisper, barely a breath, echoed through. "Leave now." He stepped back, the hair on his neck rising. Mira stirred behind him. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep but edged with something sharper. "There's something in the wall, Mira." I heard it again. She sat up, pulling the sheet over her chest. "It's just this house. I told you it's old. Plays tricks. Don't start imagining things." "I'm not imagining it," he said softly. She looked at him, her face shadowed in moonlight. "Please, Ayaan. Just let it go." He nodded, but inside, his mind wouldn't rest. The next few days, Mira changed. Not completely, but enough for him to feel it. She forgot their evening walks. She spent more time locked in her studio. She started sleeping in her room again, claiming she needed space to think. When she smiled, it didn't reach her eyes. And every night the sound returned. Always the same. Tap. Drag. Whisper. Ayaan couldn't ignore it anymore. One afternoon, while Mira was in town, he went back to the room. He moved the bed, rolled up the rug, and inspected the wooden floorboards. The sound seemed to come from behind a particular stretch of wall, where the wallpaper looked slightly newer, less faded than the rest. He tapped it gently. Hollow. He ran his fingers along the seams until he found a thin crack, barely visible. He pressed harder. Panel gave way slightly, as if something behind it pushed back. He stepped back, heart racing. But before he could go further, he heard the door downstairs open. Mira. She called out his name. He quickly moved everything back, rug, bed, furniture, and stepped into the hallway as she climbed the stairs. You're home early, he said. Her eyes scanned him. Where were you just now? In the room. Sketching. She walked past him slowly. Her presence was softer now, more distant, like she was half here and half somewhere else. That night, she didn't come to his room. Ayaan sat at his easel, staring at the blank canvas. He wanted to paint her again. He wanted to capture her how she was before, the light in her, the quiet laughter, the warm hand in his. But all he could see now was the way she stared at the floorboards, the way she flinched at creaks in the night. He went downstairs, hoping to find her in the kitchen. She wasn't there. The lights were off. He wandered through the hall, each step slow, careful. Then he saw it, her studio door slightly ajar. He pushed it open quietly. Mira was sitting in the middle of the room, surrounded by unfinished paintings. Candles flickered around her. Her hands were covered in red paint. At least he hoped it was paint. She didn't look up. Mira, he said gently. She blinked, as if waking from a trance. I used to be someone else, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Before this house. Before the quiet. He stepped closer. You can tell me. She looked up at him, eyes wide and vulnerable. I don't know if I remember how. He knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. Then I'll wait. As long as it takes. She let out a trembling breath and leaned into him. Her forehead pressed against his shoulder. I wanted to tell you. I did. But I thought if I didn't say it out loud, it would stay buried. What, Mira? She pulled back and looked into his eyes. There's something in this house. Something that doesn't want me to be happy. Ayaan held her face. Then let's leave. Let's go. Anywhere you want. She shook her head. I can't. Not yet. Why? Because I'm afraid if I leave without facing it, I'll never really be free. He didn't understand. But he saw the fear in her, the weight she carried. And he knew this wasn't just about a noise or a wall. It was about something deeper. Something she had locked away long before he ever stepped into her life. He held her until the candles burned low. That night, she came back to bed. And though the sounds returned, tap, drag, whisper, Ayaan didn't move. He just held her tighter. 'Cause whatever was behind that wall, he knew now, was part of her. And he had already fallen too far to let go. The days grew quieter after that night. Not the quiet of comfort, but the kind that sits heavy between two people who used to understand each other without speaking. Ayaan noticed the change. Mira still smiled, still kissed him in the morning, still cooked dinner with the same grace. But it was like she was performing herself instead of living. Something inside her had closed again. She didn't come to bed as often. When she did, she lay with her back to him. He could still feel the warmth of her body, but the space between them was louder than words. He tried not to push. He knew she was carrying something heavy, and maybe she wasn't ready to share it yet. But his heart had started to ache in the spaces where her silence lived. One afternoon, the rain came suddenly and without warning. Mira was out in town again, and Ayaan wandered through the house, hoping to distract himself. He ended up in the basement, a space he'd barely explored since moving in. It was darker than he remembered, even with the hanging bulb that swung slightly with the wind through the cracks. Boxes lined the walls, stacked neatly but coated with dust. Ayaan ran his fingers along an old easel tucked in the corner, the canvas torn and forgotten. Then he noticed the bookshelf. It looked wrong, too new compared to the rest of the room, the wood less weathered, the floorboards beneath it slightly different in color. He moved closer and examined it. A few books sat crooked on the shelves, dusty and unread. He pulled one free. Nothing behind it. But when he touched the side of the shelf, he felt a seam. Ayaan stepped back, placed his hands firmly on either side, and pushed. The shelf groaned softly, then shifted, just enough to reveal what was behind it. A door. Old wooden, painted the same color as the walls. A metal latch sealed it shut, rusted and thick. There was no handle, no knob. It looked like it hadn't been opened in years. He stared at it, heart pounding. The air down here was colder, heavier. He reached out to touch the latch. It was ice cold. But before he could do anything else, he heard the sound upstairs, the creak of the front door. Mira. He quickly moved the bookshelf back into place and climbed the steps, wiping the dust from his hands as calmly as he could. She stood in the hallway, rain in her hair, her coat dripping onto the floor. "You're home early," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. She looked at him for a moment too long. "You were in the basement." He froze. "I saw the dust on your shirt," she added. Ayaan didn't lie. "I was just looking around." She stepped closer, her face unreadable. "Did you touch the bookshelf?" "Mira, did you touch it?" "Yes," he said softly. Her expression hardened. "You're not to go down there again." "Why?" "Because I said so." "That's not enough." She flinched at his words, then turned away. "Some doors shouldn't be opened." "That one was already built to be opened," he said. "It's not just a wall. It's a locked door." She didn't answer. She walked past him, up the stairs, her footsteps heavier than usual. That night, they didn't sleep in the same bed. He lay awake in his room, staring at the ceiling. The distance between them had grown into something he didn't know how to cross. He loved her. He knew that now, completely without doubt, but love didn't always unlock truth. When she came to him the next morning, her face was pale. Her hands trembled as she poured coffee. "I don't want to fight with you," she said. "Then talk to me." "I can't." "Why?" "Because once I tell you what's behind that door, you won't look at me the same." He reached for her hand. "I already see you. The real you. Even when you try to hide." She looked into his eyes for a long time. Then she pulled her hand back. "I need time." "Take all you need," he whispered. "But don't shut me out." Mira nodded, but the sadness in her eyes said everything. The following days were filled with a quiet unease. Mira would walk into a room and stop mid-step like she forgot why she entered. She'd stare at the fireplace for long stretches, her lips moving silently, whispering to something only she could hear. And at night, Ayaan still heard it, the same sounds from the wall above, sometimes louder now. Tap. Drag. Whisper. Only now it seemed to echo in his dreams too. One night she came to his bed. Her eyes were puffy, her breath unsteady. "Hold me," she said. He did, wrapping her in his arms, pressing his lips against her hair. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Of what?" "Of what you'll find, of what I'll lose when you find it." "I'm not going anywhere." She cried softly, not loud or desperate, just tears that had waited too long to fall. He kissed them away, his hands gentle on her back, his heart aching with the weight she refused to share. They didn't make love that night, but there was intimacy in how she held him, in how she didn't let go even as the dawn crept through the windows. The next day, Ayaan couldn't stop thinking about the locked door. He needed answers, not to invade her secrets, but to understand the silence that lived between them. Love couldn't survive on mystery alone. It needed light, even painful light. He went back to the basement after she left for town. This time, he brought tools. He moved the shelf again, revealing the door. The latch looked older up close, almost fused into the wood with rust. He didn't try to break it. Instead, he sat on the floor in front of it, breathing in the cold, metallic air. "Mira," he whispered, even though she wasn't there, "whatever this is, I want to face it with you. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel it pulling at us." He rested his hand on the door, eyes closed. Behind it, the silence throbbed. And for a brief second, he thought he heard it again. Her voice. But not Myra's voice now, the voice of a girl. "You promised you'd never leave." His eyes shot open. He stood, backed away slowly, heart racing. And then he heard the stairs creak. He turned, expecting Mira. But there was no one there. Just the whisper of her perfume lingering in the shadows. That evening, she didn't come home. Ayaan waited. He paced. He called her name through the house. Hours passed. Finally, just before midnight, she walked in. Her clothes were soaked, her face pale as snow. "Where were you?" he asked. She looked at him. "I went to see someone. Someone who used to live here." "What did they tell you?" She swallowed hard. "That the door shouldn't be opened. Ever." "Mira, they said it feeds off memory. Off pain. I don't understand." She stepped closer, touched his chest. "There's a part of me that never left that room. Part one buried. And if you open that door, it will come back. All of it." He cupped her face. "Then let it. Let me help you carry it. I don't want you to see who I used to be. I only care about who you are now. And I love her." Myra's lips trembled. And then she kissed him. It wasn't like before. This kiss was desperate, needy, full of tears and unspoken things. They moved to the floor, wrapped in each other, her fingers gripping his shirt like she was afraid he'd disappear. And afterward, as they lay tangled together, she whispered into the dark, "If you ever open that door, don't go in alone." He kissed her shoulder. "I won't." But his heart knew. The door had already been opened. Not in wood, but in her. And something had already begun to slip through. It was a Friday morning when Mira told him she had to leave. "There's someone I need to see." "I'll be gone for the weekend," she said, standing by the door, her coat already on, her hair tucked into a scarf. Ayaan studied her face, searching for the warmth she used to give so freely. But there was only quiet worry there now, an ache she was still trying to protect him from. "Do you want me to come with you?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, not this time." She didn't kiss him goodbye. Only touched his cheek lightly, her fingers soft, like a goodbye she didn't want to name. Then she was gone, the old car's engine humming away until the sound faded completely. He stood by the window long after, watching the road where she had disappeared. And then he turned toward the basement. The house was silent as he moved. The floorboards creaked under his weight, the air thick and cold, like it knew where he was going. Like it didn't want him to go. He paused at the basement door. "This is wrong," he told himself. "She asked you not to." But something inside him whispered louder, "She's drowning in this secret. And if you don't face it, she'll never be free." The basement smelled like old paper and earth. He moved quickly, pulling the bookshelf aside and revealing the hidden door. The rusted latch still held it shut, but his resolve had changed. He grabbed a hammer and chisel from the shelf and knelt. Took 15 minutes. With every strike, the metal groaned louder. Flakes of rust crumbled to the floor like ashes. His hands trembled with effort. His heart thundered in his chest. Finally, with a sharp cry, the latch snapped free. The door creaked open. It wasn't what he expected. The room inside was small, no more than 10 feet across. The walls were lined with photographs, some curled with age. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a yellow glow that barely reached the corners. Dust floated in the air, suspended like secrets. Ayaan stepped inside. There were hundreds of pictures, and every single one had him in it. Different clothes, different ages. Some older, some recent. Some showed him smiling, some laughing, some sleeping, photographs he'd never taken. In one, he was sitting by a lake. In another, he was walking into a cafe. He blinked, heart hammering. It wasn't him, but it looked exactly like him. On the far wall were newspaper clippings, yellowed and brittle. He read them slowly. Local musician vanishes without a trace. Search continues for missing man. 7 years later, no new leads in Elijah Ray's disappearance. A photo was pinned beneath one headline. It was him, or someone who looked just like him. Same eyes, same jaw, same tired smile. Ayaan stepped back, breath caught in his throat. There were journals, too. He picked one up, flipping through pages filled in Mira's handwriting. First, they were love letters. Notes about memories, songs they'd shared, dreams she'd once had. Then they turned darker. Words crossed out. Scribbled apologies. Please. I can still hear your voice in the walls. I see you in strangers. I chase ghosts in my dreams. If I find him again, will it break me? Ayaan sat on the floor, the journal slipping from his hands. Everything spun. Mira had been in love before, with someone who looked just like him, and he had disappeared without a trace. 7 years ago. A chill ran through him. He remembered how Mira had stared at him the first time they met, not with curiosity but something deeper. Recognition. Fear. All this time, he thought she was holding back because of some distant trauma. But it wasn't distant at all. It was him, or who he reminded her of. A ghost in her memory. A perfect copy of someone she had loved and lost. He stood slowly, staring at the photographs. Was this room her grief? Her prison? Or something else entirely? And why had she hidden it? Why hadn't she told him? Because she was afraid he'd leave. Because she was afraid he wasn't real. A noise echoed behind him, just a creak. A whisper of the old house settling. But it sent shivers down his spine. He turned and left the room, sealing the door again, replacing the bookshelf like before. He stood at the top of the stairs, his hands shaking. Outside, the wind howled softly through the trees. Mira had said, "If you ever open that door, don't go in alone." But he had. And now something had shifted. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every creak in the house sounded louder. Every memory of Mira felt heavier. He kept seeing her eyes when she looked at him the first time, the way her voice trembled when she said she was afraid. Not of the house, but of him. When the sun finally rose, he wandered outside. He ended up in the meadow behind the house, where they had once laid on the grass and watched clouds pass like lazy boats. He sat down, the grass cool beneath him. What was he to her? A second chance? A cruel reminder? A love story repeated, unfinished? He didn't know. But what he did know, what he felt deep in his soul, was that his love for Mira hadn't changed. Not even after everything. He still wanted her. Still wanted to hold her hand through the pain. Still wanted to kiss away the ghosts. He would wait for her return. And when she came back, he'd tell her. I found the room. I saw it all. And I'm still here. Even if he was just a shadow of the man she once loved, he would become something real. Something hers. He spent the next day in the studio painting. Not her face this time, but her heart. He painted her fear, her longing, her sadness. He painted the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching. And he painted the room, the photographs, the pain, the truth. Took hours. But it calmed him. 'Cause even in that strange secret there was love. Mira returned on Sunday evening. Her car pulled up slowly, like she wasn't sure if she should come home. He opened the door before she could knock. Their eyes met. Something in her softened. "I didn't know if you'd still be here," she whispered. "I found it," he said. She didn't pretend. Didn't deny. Just nodded slowly. He stepped forward and cupped her face. "You should have told me. I was afraid." "I know. I thought you'd leave." "I'm not him, Mira. But I love you. The more than anything." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "He disappeared and took half of me with him. And I want to help you find that half again. Not by replacing him. Just by being me." She let out a shaky breath and leaned into his chest. "I used to come to that room every day," she whispered. "I talked to him. Wrote to him. For years. And then you showed up and it felt like he came back. But not quite. You were different. Gentler. Quieter. It scared me how much I needed you." He kissed her hair. "Then need me. As long as it takes." That night they made love again, not out of desperation, but out of something slow and healing. It wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about choosing the present. And for the first time, Mira didn't cry afterward. She just smiled, eyes full of something soft and new. Hope. Mira didn't speak the moment she stepped inside the house. The door creaked shut behind her with a finality that echoed through the quiet halls. Ayaan stood in the living room, waiting, his heart tight in his chest. Outside, twilight painted the windows in a soft, sad hue, the kind of light that belongs only to things breaking. Her eyes swept across the room before falling on him. For a long moment, nothing passed between them. No words. No breath. Just silence and the space where truth finally demanded to be heard. "You opened it," she said quietly. "I did." She stepped closer, her boots barely making a sound on the wooden floor. "You saw everything?" He nodded. "The photographs. The articles. Your journals." Something crumbled in her face. Not just pain, but exhaustion, years of carrying something too heavy for one heart to bear. Her lips trembled. She clutched her coat tighter around her like a shield. "You weren't supposed to find it like that. I needed to know. Not because I didn't trust you, because I couldn't keep loving you halfway." Myra's shoulders shook. She turned away from him, walking to the fireplace and resting her hand on the mantel as if it could hold her steady. When she spoke again, her voice cracked open. "His name was Elijah." Ayaan didn't interrupt. "We were engaged. 7 years ago. He was a musician, a little wild, a little impossible, but he loved me. God, he loved me." She closed her eyes, and Ayaan could almost see her slipping back into that memory. The weight of love, the way it lifts and binds at the same time. One morning he went for a walk. Just like always. He kissed me on the forehead and said he'd be back by lunch. He never came home. She turned to face him, and her eyes glistened with unshed tears. They searched for months. Every forest trail. Every riverbank. Nothing. It was like he vanished into air. Like he'd never existed at all. Police gave up. Friends stopped calling. But I couldn't. Ayaan took a slow breath, letting her speak without rushing the pain. "I kept the room as a way to remember him. Talk to him. I needed to believe there was still a part of him somewhere. I wrote to him every day for 2 years. And then I stopped." "Why?" "Because I saw your face." She stepped toward him now, slowly, each movement filled with guilt and longing. "The day you came to see the room, I almost turned you away. I thought I was losing my mind. You looked so much like him. But then you smiled, and it wasn't his smile. It was yours. softer, sadder. And I let you stay because, for the first time in years, I wanted to breathe again. Ayan's heart twisted. You weren't just his echo, Ayaan. You were something new. Something beautiful. I fought it. I hated myself for wanting you. You never had to hate yourself, he said gently. I did, she said, tears finally breaking free. Because every time I touched you, I wondered if I was touching a memory. Every time I kissed you, I questioned if I was betraying him. Or betraying you. Ayaan stepped forward now. Slowly. Carefully. You didn't betray me. You let me in. Even when it scared you. You loved me in pieces, Mira. But I loved you whole. Her breath hitched. I never meant to lie to you. I just didn't know how to explain. How do you say, I think I'm falling in love with a man who reminds me of the one I lost without sounding mad? You say it like that, he whispered, touching her hand. She let out a small, broken laugh. I kept asking myself, what if this is a second chance? Or what if it's just the universe playing a cruel trick? He cupped her face, brushing her tears away with his thumb. Maybe it's not about second chances. Maybe it's just about love. No ghosts. No past. Just us. Mira leaned into him. Her body trembled with the storm that had lived inside her too long. I was afraid you'd see the room and walk away. I saw the room, he said softly, and all I wanted to do was hold you. Her eyes closed at those words, and then her lips found his, not urgently, not desperately, but with slow reverence. A kiss that spoke of relief and apology and the quiet ache of reunion. She clung to him, and he let her, holding her as if she were the only truth left in the world. They stood like that for a long time in the fading evening light, saying nothing and everything. Later, wrapped in the warmth of the fire, they sat on the old couch, fingers intertwined. Tell me more about him, Ayaan said. Mira looked at him, surprised. Why? Because he mattered to you. And if I love you, then he matters too. She smiled through tears. He used to sing to me when I had nightmares. Key and ridiculous, but it always worked. He once cooked me dinner and nearly set the kitchen on fire. I laughed so hard I cried. Ayaan smiled. Sounds like someone I'd want to meet. She squeezed his hand. You would have liked each other. And now, he asked. She took a deep breath. Now, I want to stop living in that room. I want to remember him, but I don't want to sleep beside a ghost anymore. Ayaan brought her hand to his lips. Then let's close the room. Together. The next morning, they went down to the basement. Mira unlocked the door and stepped inside first. She moved through the room like she was touching memories, saying goodbye to pieces of herself. Ayaan followed quietly, respectfully. She pulled down the photographs, one by one, and stacked them carefully. She folded the articles, the notes, the torn bits of her grief. She closed the journals and placed them in a box. Ayaan didn't say anything. He just stood with her in silence. When the room was empty, she turned to him. Thank you for letting me mourn. Thank you for not judging me. You don't need to thank me, he said. Love is messy. Real. Broken. But it's worth fighting for. Mira stepped into his arms again. This time there was no fear in her touch. Only love. Pure. Raw. Honest. That night they made love in the upstairs bedroom, without shadows, without ghosts. It was different. Deeper. Every kiss was a promise. Every sigh was a piece of healing. Their bodies moved in perfect rhythm, not searching, not filling holes, but celebrating the miracle of finding each other through the storm. Afterward, Mira rested her head on Ayaan's chest, fingers tracing idle circles on his skin. Do you still love me knowing all of this? She asked softly. He kissed her forehead. I love you more because of it. She smiled, eyes closed. I think for the first time in years, I want to start over. Ayaan held her tighter. Then let's begin. Right here. right now. Outside, the wind carried away the last of winter's chill. And in that old countryside house, two hearts, once fractured, began to beat as one. The morning after they cleared the hidden room, the house felt different, lighter, as if the air had finally let out a long, exhausted sigh. Sunlight came in through the windows more easily, dancing on the wooden floors, warming the corners that once felt haunted. But inside Ayaan, the light hadn't quite reached yet. He stood by the easel in his studio, brush in hand but unmoving. A blank canvas stared back at him. It had been 3 days since they closed the door to the past. 3 days since Mira had packed away the photographs and journals of her lost love. And though their nights had been tender, filled with whispered apologies and quiet kisses, a knot still tugged in Ayaan's chest. He loved her. There was no question about that. But love didn't erase pain. Love didn't magically make betrayal feel like less of a cut. Even though Mira hadn't meant to deceive him, even though he understood her grief, part of him still wrestled with the ache of being someone's reflection before becoming someone's choice. Mira found him that morning, staring at the canvas. "Still stuck?" she asked gently. He looked over his shoulder and gave a soft smile. "Just thinking." She stepped closer, her presence always quiet, always calming. "About me." "Always about you." Mira reached for his hand. "You haven't painted since that night." "I don't know who I'm painting anymore," he said honestly. "The woman who haunted a room or the woman who let it go?" Mira didn't flinch. She'd stopped hiding from the truth, even when it hurt. "I'm still both, Ayaan. I think I always will be. But I'm also the woman who loves you." He searched her eyes. "Do you?" "Not the memory of someone else." Her fingers curled around his. "You're not his shadow, Ayaan. You're my light. You brought me back to life. I just didn't know how to let go until you showed me." Ayaan set the brush down and turned fully to her. "Then help me believe that." Not with words. With something real. She led him back down to the basement. The door to the hidden room stood ajar, the last time it ever would. Together, they brought out the last of the boxes. Mira had labeled them not with Elijah's name, but with dates, years of her life she had frozen in time. She paused over a box marked year 3, then looked at Ayaan. "Do you want to see what's inside?" He hesitated, then nodded. "If you're ready." She opened it. Inside were unsent letters, pages and pages of handwritten words. Some tear-stained, some folded with care. Mira handed him one. Ayaan read slowly, his throat tightening with every line. "Dear Elijah, today I thought I heard your voice in the wind. I turned so quickly I dropped my tea. I cried after. Not because it wasn't you, but because a part of me still hopes it could be." When he looked up, her eyes were glistening. "I used to write to him like that every day. It was my way of not going mad. And now I want to write new letters. To you. For us." They burned the letters together that afternoon, not out of anger but love, a quiet funeral for the woman Mira used to be. As the ash floated into the sky, Ayaan felt something loosen in him. A letting go. A beginning. Later, back in the studio, he finally dipped his brush into paint. But this time, he didn't try to capture her mystery or sadness or distance. He didn't paint her like a muse trapped in secrets. He painted her like the woman she had become in his arms, soft, strong, scarred, and alive. He painted the smile she gave him when she thought he wasn't watching, the curve of her neck when she lay beside him in peace. He painted the warmth of her eyes when she reached for him in the dark, the small freckle near her lip he kissed every morning. He painted her as his equal, not his inspiration, as his truth, not his puzzle. Day by day, the painting came to life. And day by day, so did their love. They rebuilt trust like a garden, patiently, intentionally. They cooked together, laughed together, made up for all the silences they once filled with fear. Mira began writing again, not in journals hidden behind walls, but in the open, by the window where sunlight poured in. Sometimes Ayaan would watch her from across the room, his heart catching in his chest, not because she reminded him of someone else, but because she was entirely wonderfully herself. One evening, Mira returned from town with a small gift. She handed it to Ayaan with a shy smile. He opened it slowly. Inside was a blank leather journal, and on the first page she had written, "To Ayaan, the man who rewrote my ending." He looked at her, touched beyond words. "I thought maybe you could write the next chapter with me." He pulled her into a kiss, slow and tender. "I already am." They spent that night wrapped in each other, no ghosts between them. Their love was no longer painted in shadows or echoes, but in the raw beauty of now. Every touch was present, every whisper a promise. When the painting was finally finished, Ayaan didn't show it to her immediately. He waited for the right moment. That moment came a week later, on a warm spring evening, as twilight lit the sky in soft purples and golds. He led Mira to the studio with her eyes closed. "Are you ready?" he asked. She nodded. He uncovered the canvas. Mira opened her eyes and gasped. It was her, but not the version she saw in old photographs or mirror reflections. It was the her that only Ayaan knew. The her that had broken and healed. The her that was no longer lost. In the painting, she stood with her eyes lifted slightly, bathed in golden light, a gentle smile playing on her lips. Behind her, the old house, no longer looming or secretive, but warm and alive. A door was open behind her, and sunlight poured through it. Mira stepped forward, her fingers trembling. "It's me." "It's us," Ayaan said. "Our beginning." She turned to him, emotion choking her. "How did you see me like that?" "Because that's how I love you." She threw her arms around him, burying her face in his neck. "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you." He pulled back to look into her eyes. "You deserve all of it. You deserve love that stays." She kissed him then, fiercely, fully, as if sealing the promise between them. From that day on, the house was no longer a place of grief. It became a sanctuary of healing, of laughter, of art and dreams. Mira and Ayaan didn't try to erase the past, but they no longer lived in it. They honored it with quiet memories, but never let it steal the joy of now. Some days they sat by the fire reading. Some nights they danced barefoot in the kitchen. And every morning, Ayaan woke up to the woman he loved, not as a mystery to solve, but as a story still being written, together. Their love was no longer haunted. It was free. And in that freedom, they found the kind of forever that no locked door could ever contain.
If you enjoy my videos, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps my channel grow, and I will make more good videos for you.